Welcome to Building the Future, hosted by Kevin Horick. With millions of listeners a month, Building the Future has quickly become one of the fastest rising programs, with a focus on interviewing startups, entrepreneurs, investors, CEOs, and more. The radio and TV show airs in 15 markets across the globe, including Silicon Valley. For full showtimes, past episodes, or to sponsor the show, please visit buildingthefutureshow.com.
The show is a proud media partner for the 11th Annual Media Excellence Awards, which are produced by Access Entertainment in Los Angeles, California. The Media Excellence Awards are recognized as the most influential awards show honoring innovation and leadership in all things mobile entertainment, lifestyle, and technology. For more information on how to submit to these awards, please visit MediaXAwards.com. Welcome back to the show. Today we have Michael P. O'Rourke. He's the co-founder and CEO at POKT Network. Michael, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Kevin. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you on the show. I think what you guys are doing at POKT and some of the other things that we'll kind of get into later in the show are actually really, really innovative and cool. But maybe before we get into that, let's get to know you a little bit better and start off with where you grew up.
Sure. So I was born in the Dominican Republic.
Oh, very cool.
In Santo Domingo, Dominican Republic.
Okay.
But at 2 years old, my family moved to Tampa, Florida.
Okay.
And for the most part of my life, I've lived in Tampa. I had a stint where I lived in Atlanta, Georgia, near Atlanta, Georgia, for about 3 years when I was younger.
Okay.
And I moved out for about half a year to Silicon Valley over in San Jose for about 6 months when I was learning the code. But other than that, I've been in Tampa most of my life.
Okay. What made you go out to the Valley? Just for a job?
Yeah, I had just graduated college, and I learned to code, and I'd been coding for about 8 months, and I felt like going to the Mecca would be a great place to find a job.
Interesting.
So, but I ended up back here in Florida anyway. So.
Okay, so what did you take in university and why?
Yeah, so university was an interesting process for me. I went in originally studying business.
Okay.
And I actually ended up failing out of school after my first 2 years, and mainly because I played a lot of video games and a lot of World of Warcraft.
It happens.
Actually, and I came back and I started studying international studies. I wanted to be a diplomat. I've always been a really big fan of history, and I'm bilingual, so
Sure.
I figured it'd be really cool to kind of live in a place in South America, work at a consulate or something like that. But the thing is I've always been really interested in tech. I've always kind of used Twitter and just been kind of in tune with a lot of the bloggers and venture capitalists and entrepreneurs and stuff like that. And even from my first year of college, I tried to start some businesses and things like that. So I've kind of always had that bug.
Interesting.
And about 2 semesters before I graduated, Apple released a new programming language called Swift.
Sure. Yeah.
And I had tried to learn to code a bunch of times before that, but
by yourself, or did you take some classes for that?
Outside of YouTube, online courses
Sure.
and things like that, it was all on my own.
Okay.
And for some reason, Swift stuck, and maybe it was because I loved making like a war game app, like the
Sure.
card game, and showing my friends or something like that. But for some reason, because I was able to do it on my phone, right?
Sure.
That Swift stuck. And those last 6 months or so, I was obsessed with it and picked it up and learned. And shortly after I graduated, I moved to the Valley actually to look for a job.
Interesting.
So that's how I ended up there.
Very cool. So I think, like, just to kind of step back for a second, Swift, I think, is a really good language for a lot of people to learn to code, whether they're a fan of kind of iOS or not. I think a lot of people are, but even if you're not a fan of iOS, just being able to get something like the language is pretty, like, it's a modern language that was created by Apple not that long ago. So some of the more like languages that have been around for decades can be a lot harder to learn. So I think just for people listening, like if they're looking to learn to program, I think like Swift is one of the languages I think that seems to make sense to a lot of people, especially when they're first learning to code. And then you can move on to other languages later if you choose. But once you understand it, I think Swift is a really good language. That's what I've heard, and kind of through my own kind of experience as well. It seems to be like that. And it sounds like you would agree with that.
Yeah, I agree completely. Developing for iOS is interesting. It's like a good video game actually. It's easy to pick up, but really
Okay.
difficult to master.
Yeah. Okay.
So
Sure.
so 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 like with Xcode, for example, you start kind of building a really simple app with really simple, drag and drop buttons. You literally drag, from the screen, of the button to the code, and it connects it and everything, and it's really simple. And you're like, oh man, this is really easy. And you start to kind of get into more complicated apps, and
Sure.
and you're like, oh, okay, I actually need the code, and it kind of leads you down that path in a different way than most frameworks or programming languages would. So
Sure.
that was really, I really appreciate Apple for that actually, and I think that's an underappreciated thing about Apple, and part of the
Agreed.
reason why iOS is even so successful in the first place is kind of this developer infrastructure that they've built. So I agree completely.
Yeah, because they used, like, when the iPhone originally launched and up until like a few years ago, the language name escapes me, but like you originally didn't code in
Objective-C.
Swift. Objective-C, yes, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, well, I guess you could technically kind of still use it, but they're heavily pushing you to go to Swift. And if you're building something new, you would just automatically go to Swift, right? Like it just
Yeah,
makes sense.
absolutely. And it's funny, man, because when I first learned, I was coding Swift for about a year,
Okay.
and my first job in development was actually a job in Objective C.
Sure.
So after I'd been to the Valley for 6 months, applied to literally hundreds of jobs, like literally going down AngelList and just
Interesting.
applying to every startup I possibly could. I ended up getting a job back in Sarasota, Florida, and they offered to just move me back, pay for everything. I was like, okay,
Interesting.
I'm in. But that job actually happened to be in Objective C, and man, I felt like I was going back in time 30 years
Sure.
just from the language. Um,
Interesting.
but it's interesting. You get used to the stability of Objective C, and with Swift, especially at the beginning, you just got used to the language changing. Quite
Sure.
literally breaking changes to your code, which kind of actually prepared me for blockchain development in the first place, because I would argue that blockchain development actually moves even faster than than what the Swift
Interesting.
team was doing.
Sure.
So it's funny how that worked out, but it actually just kind of mentally prepared me as a new developer. Like, okay, I'm used to things breaking and moving really fast. So
Sure.
it's an interesting coincidence.
Yeah, that's interesting. So walk me through up until kind of Pocket became a thing, and what exactly is Pocket?
Sure. So actually, I met my co-founders at that startup in Sarasota.
Oh,
Actually,
interesting. Okay, like just
yeah.
co-work,
So
like as a coworker?
yeah.
Okay.
So I was the first hire, and or the second hire. We had an Android developer, and I was the first iOS developer.
Okay.
And our infrastructure was completely broken. And about a month in, a friend of a friend had recommended me my co-founder Luis. So through a series of really bold moves they made, in about 2 weeks, they sold everything, married their girlfriends, and moved over to the U.S. actually
Wow.
to work with us together. Yeah, and so that was Luis Isabel. Valeria came through a different way through university actually. She
Okay.
was she was getting some class credit actually for working at the startup. So we were all there building this thing, and in about, I'd say, November 2016 is when we kind of started talking about crypto in a serious way and started coming up with Pocket together.
Okay.
Throughout this whole time, we all had lived in the same apartment complex together.
Got you.
And when they moved to Sarasota, and I was the only one with the car at the time, and the job was about 25 minutes away from work, or
Okay.
from where we lived. So every day for almost a year, we were in this car together for almost an hour every day.
Interesting.
So these car rides is kind of where Pocket was first born.
Okay.
And in fact, we actually wanted to build something else
Okay.
first. We had this idea of building a Telcoin, where we didn't have to kind of like change my SIM card or get a new phone when I was traveling.
Yeah,
So
interesting.
we had this whole idea of incentivizing people to even spin up their own MVNOs and everything. And since I'm on a T-Mobile network, right, I should be
Yeah.
able to go to Paris and go on the same frequency provider that they have over there.
Sure.
So it was to tokenize our cell phone data and everything like that. But we definitely realized that was way, 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 way too early, and really there was not enough just general blockchain infrastructure to really support that kind of a thing. So we actually
Interesting.
came across this problem of this node incentivization problem, which is what Pocket is we're actually solving this idea where miners are incentivized to run nodes to mine because they earn Bitcoin or Ethereum, but you can also run a full like archival node. But the problem is right now in Ethereum, for example, it's over a terabyte, and it's just getting bigger faster. And 99.9% of people aren't going to run a full archival Ethereum node to kind of support the network. So that's where Pocket comes in, and Pocket's quite literally a protocol to incentivize people to run full nodes, right? So that's kind of how we meandered across Pocket. And I'd say for about the first 12 months, Pocket was a series of smart contracts on Ethereum. Okay. And after we kind of got deeper into the research and building Pocket, and there's an artifact on our GitHub that you can see that's kind of the original smart contracts of Pocket. We realized that Ethereum really wasn't the right platform for us, at least in its current state, because it's expensive. If just to give you just an example of kind of the scale, the person or the company that provides infrastructure for probably 80 to 90% of Ethereum, they're called Infura, and they're awesome people. We actually meet with them pretty regularly. In March of 2017, they were doing 180,000 API requests a day.
Wow.
For Ethereum. Today they're doing over 10 billion API requests.
Exactly. Yeah, interesting.
So if you're doing all these API requests and writing to the Ethereum blockchain, even if it's every 15 seconds, right? Yeah. You're batching them and everything, that gets really expensive really quickly. So kind of building your own blockchain, and in fact we kind of went through a meandering route to kind of building our own blockchain too, because there's a whole bunch of scaling solutions that we looked at on Ethereum first, including state channels and this really cool solution called Plasma. And Plasma was interesting for us because it kind of opened up an entire design space for us.
Okay.
When we were building the blockchain, or when we were first kind of initially planning it, and we actually ended up just kind of speccing out our own blockchain as a Plasma chain. And we were like, well, why should we even be a Plasma chain? Let's just move it off and kind of make it its own standalone thing. Through a whole series of technical reasons, but yeah, that's kind of how we ended up kind of going to Pocket being its own blockchain, because you can kind of build the methods and everything kind of closer to the metal, if you will. Sure. Everything is significantly cheaper for everyone involved, and it really increases the success of the infrastructure just generally, right? So that's kind of how we got there.
Interesting. Okay, so I want to dive a little bit deeper into Pocket, but I want to also kind of step back for a second and talk about, like, obviously there's a bunch of developers that listen to the show and probably understand everything you just said. And then there's going to be non-developers that listen to the show. Do you maybe want to give a bit of a high level kind of overview that's maybe a little bit less technical on kind of what you do? So maybe if somebody's listening, they could go to their developer and say, hey, you guys should just check this out and maybe we can implement this.
Yeah, so I mean, at its core, we just try to make it really easy for developers to build dApps. Okay. Right. So, like for example, if you're using an app that communicates directly with Ethereum, right? So that's the whole beauty of the blockchain, right? Is you don't have to have like a traditional server or anything like that, right? And the problem is the tools that most developers would use, for Swift, for example, for iOS, are not nearly as matured. Not even, like 100, not even probably 1,000, as mature as like developing for iOS would be, for example, right now. Sure. So we're building a suite of infrastructure and tools for developers to actually make it easier for them to build applications, and that includes mobile applications and web applications as well. Very cool. So at a very, very high level, we build tools for developers. Everything we build is open source, so it's all there on our GitHub. And these tools, we strive to make it as easy as possible for developers to actually build these really cool decentralized applications, right? Very so that's really at a high level what we do.
Yeah, okay. No, I just wanted to make sure, just so people are clear of that. So for developers, how do they kind of get started with actually using Pocket?
Yeah, so right now we actually just started building the blockchain itself. So the actual kind of like core client. Okay. But right now we've actually built, before that, we've built a bunch of those tools, right? Sure. So if you want to be your own kind of infrastructure provider for Ethereum, so you see the growth that that this company called Infura had from 180,000 to 10 billion,
Yeah.
You could spin up your own version of Infura and kind of as an infrastructure provider. So if, let's say you're someone who works at Amazon Web Services or Netflix or Google or any of these places who, are really good at infrastructure. You could go and actually spin one of these nodes up for Ethereum, and we're actually working with a couple of blockchains now to spin to have those same kind of plugins for those other blockchains, and actually be a provider for Ethereum and these other blockchains, right? Sure. So that's one side of the thing. If you're an infrastructure expert and you're good at configuring things or running your own local servers, that's one way to get started. If you're an iOS developer or an Android developer, for example, the other way is to build a dApp that's for iOS or Android, right? Okay. So we built this app called Banana Quest as kind of an example for developers to see, to kind of inspire and to kind of show people how it is that you can use Pocket. But really, it's just one line of code in your iOS or Android project from CocoaPods. And all of a sudden, it opens up the entire API or the entire set of tools that Pocket provides. So, for example, if you want to create a wallet, it's literally one line of code in Swift to create a wallet, right? So that's kind of what we're striving to do, is make it really easy for developers to kind of focus on the app itself or the game or whatever it is, and kind of leave the complicated blockchain stuff to the SDK itself, right? So, so that's kind of what we've built, right? So, you could just play around with the SDK and the Ethereum plugin, and I definitely recommend taking a look at Banana Quest. That's also open on our GitHub as well.
Sure. So I want to dive a bit deeper into what Banana Quest is, because it's a pretty cool little idea that you guys kind of built. So what exactly is it, and why did you guys kind of build it?
Yeah, so Banana Quest was born at the ETH Buenos Aires hackathon about 2 months ago, or 2.5 months ago, I think. Or close, maybe 2.5, 3 months ago. And we were just trying to come up with a cool idea to build using the Pocket tools. So it's like, I have an easy way to interact with the infrastructure, and I have an easy way to run the infrastructure. So we're like, okay, what's a cool thing that we can build? And we came up with this idea called Banana Quest. And we feel like Banana Quest really highlights the strength of cryptocurrencies in general, and why they're important. Because really, what really is what makes crypto so amazing is that you have this idea of digital ownership, right? So Bitcoin is kind of the first application of the first blockchain where, there's a finite number of Bitcoins and all these things, right? Yeah. So we decided to kind of show that concept off, building on Ethereum with a set of smart contracts that we also wrote. But generally speaking, what Banana Quest is kind of like a mix between Pokemon Go and geocaching. Okay, so with geocaching, you basically just go on the website. It's actually a public thing. You can go on the geocaching website if you Google it, and you just get a series of coordinates. And for example, there could be like a trash can behind a bank that some physical object is, that you pick it up, you sign it, you kind of prove that you found it, and you set it back exactly where it was. So it's kind of geocaching, right? Right. And Pokemon Go is just, you're finding these augmented reality Pokemon through the game and everything. So we kind of mix that, where there's two kind of ways to play the game. You can be a quest creator, so you can create these quests. And what's cool about the app is that it's talking directly to Ethereum. So all the data, there's no actual traditional database. Everything is actually on a smart contract and being read and written to a smart contract, which is really cool. And you can create a quest, and you would have a hint, a quest name. And the cool part is you can say, how many Banana tokens do you want this quest to have? Okay. So for example, if I create a really hard quest, let's say, or at the top of the Empire State Building, and you have to get to the top of the Empire State Building, and there's only one token reward, only the first person to complete that quest would actually get the token reward, right? Got you. So it kind of shows the scarcity, right? And it's kind of like this idea of digital scarcity, and it's this kind of interesting kind of a token, right? So there's this idea, this concept of non-fungible tokens, which whereas Bitcoin is considered fungible, where every Bitcoin is worth exactly the same. Right. Non-fungible is the opposite, right? So if you're comparing cows, one cow might be 20 pounds heavier than the other, so they're different. And you can have that same concept in cryptocurrency as well. So each Banana token is actually unique and can never be found again once all of them have been rewarded. Interesting. And what's cool about this is that you kind of you start to see the real strength of crypto because we have this set of smart contracts in Ethereum, but it actually allows anyone else to actually interact with it and kind of create their own game on top of it.
Okay.
And to give you an example, for example, there's this really kind of the first kind of explosion in this concept was an app called CryptoKitties.
Yeah.
This blew up sometime last year, and a few months later, and it was a very simple game where you just breed cats, and it's just a very simple game. Someone else built a game called Hyper Dragons.
Okay.
And you can create these Hyper Dragons, and if you feed your CryptoKitty token to the Hyper Dragon, it actually gets more powers.
Interesting.
So
That's cool.
And CryptoKitties had no say in it. They had nothing to, it's just, hey, we like CryptoKitties. Let's make a fun game using CryptoKitties with Hyper Dragons, right?
Sure.
So that same concept applies to Banana Quest, right? So someone could create a quest where, or create a game where you need, a Banana token, a CryptoKitty, and a Hyper Dragon to do some other thing, right?
Sure.
So, and it just kind of builds on itself, right? So it's really fun and interesting, and it just kind of shows really the power of cryptocurrency,
Sure.
And the blockchain to people, and in a really, also it kind of shows how easy it is to build an app like that with our tools.
Interesting. No, I think it's quite fascinating kind of what you guys are doing in the space, right? Because I think, at least in my experience, and you can tell me your thoughts on this, is some of this stuff gets so complicated so fast that you almost don't know where to start, right?
Yeah, that's very true.
And so what the tools you guys are building allow people to kind of get started almost instantly, right?
Yeah, correct. So it's, one line of code of Cocoa Pods, and you can quite literally just get started experimenting with it, right? And that's really kind of the fun thing about it.
Sure. So how do you guys monetize POKT?
Yeah, so there's a couple things we're doing.
Okay.
So we're actively reaching out to blockchains. So in the short term, we're actively reaching out to blockchains and kind of doing SLAs, right? Where they pay us to kind of build these tools in the short term.
Sure.
And until we reach the point where we can actually release this blockchain, at that point when we're running all this infrastructure, we can then plug in that infrastructure and start earning our POKT tokens, right? For servicing all these applications, right? So we're kind of acting as an infrastructure provider, but in the meantime, we're aiming for these SLAs with other blockchains because they need this kind of infrastructure,
right?
As well, and that's kind of in the short term. And like I said, in the long term, one of our models is obviously we'll actually plug in this infrastructure and earning POKT tokens, but really, in the grand scheme of things, that's not really the goal of POKT Inc., right? So POKT Inc. is building this POKT protocol that is completely open source. It has its own governance mechanisms and everything. Mm-hmm. But as a company, there are some really interesting things that can be built on top of the protocol.
Okay.
Because what you're doing here is you're having a network. So you have someone running POKT, but they might also be running Ethereum, Bitcoin, Litecoin, Zcash, and a whole host of other blockchains, right?
Sure.
Because they're providing the infrastructure for them. So when you have a blockchain that acts as kind of like it acts as a protocol that is hosting all of these other blockchains, and that doesn't exist today. And the potential for that is really, really, really interesting. Actually,
it's huge. Actually,
so that doesn't exist, right? So one of these things that we want to build is, for example, you can build a decentralized exchange for every cryptocurrency that's hosted on POKT, right? So you've got
interesting.
1,000. Yeah, so we can be kind of like a portal, right? And as POKT Inc. being that portal, we'll take some small percentage for being, the liquidity provider and providing that portal for that decentralized exchange, right? So that allows us as a business to actually make money down the road without really, extracting rent from the protocol itself or anything like that. And also, people can compete with us too, right? Like we're building this thing, but also other people can build it too, right? So that's one thing that we've thought about building. The other thing is custodial services. Okay. There's some really cool algorithms out there that kind of take your private keys and kind of split them up amongst many nodes, kind of as like a decentralized storage, if you will. And POKT can be kind of like a custodial guardian, right? For, you have some person who, maybe they invested, $20 million in Dash or something, and they don't want to deal with taking care of those keys, right?
Yeah.
So you've got these really big companies that are doing it right, like Coinbase and Gemini and things like that. But there's a way that you can actually host those custodial services, in a decentralized protocol by having a bunch of nodes like that. So we think that's a really interesting way to make money as well. And also another third thing that we think is really interesting is kind of running like mining pools, if you will, for the Pocket protocol.
Interesting.
So kind of like how it works today with a normal mining pool, you're kind of trusting your hash power to another central entity, and they are paying you out in Bitcoin or Ethereum or whatever it is.
Right.
We can do the same thing for people who just want to earn some Pocket, where we make it like 1 to 3 clicks to run some infrastructure.
Okay.
And since Pocket, and anyone should be able to do it, right? So the idea is to make it so easy that my grandmother can go on the Pocket website, 3 clicks, and they're running some infrastructure, and Pocket can then they allow us to kind of lend their computing power, and we do all the load balancing and all that stuff, and you just kind of start earning Pocket as a result of that, right? So, and then obviously we take a small piece of that as well.
Sure.
So as a business, like as we were building this, we're kind of coming up with lots of ideas to kind of build businesses on top of the protocol. So that's kind of in the long term, kind of how we see it.
Interesting.
Thanks for listening to Building the Future. This show is heard by more than 1 million people monthly in over 15 markets worldwide, including Silicon Valley. Kevin Horick's guests are leading business owners, successful entrepreneurs, and merchandisers worldwide. Now, your brand has an opportunity to tap into this dedicated and active group of business people who are looking for places to invest and the right opportunities to support. Find out how you can get involved at buildingthefutureshow.com.
So how did you guys fund this originally? Did you raise money? Did you self-fund? Or how did you go about kind of getting this thing rocking?
Yeah, so I got into Bitcoin in 2013.
Okay.
And back then it wasn't blockchain, it wasn't crypto, it was just Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Right. So
totally.
I bought my first Bitcoin in about I don't know, sometime in late 2013.
Okay.
I want to say September, August, or something like that.
Very early.
And that I'd held my Bitcoin. Actually, it's a funny story. You can probably talk to anyone in the space who's had this kind of a story.
Sure.
Actually, when I moved to San Jose, I had about something like 25 or 30 Bitcoin or something like that.
Okay.
And I ended up selling it all to live in San Jose.
Wow.
While I was looking for it. So I actually didn't get kind of like my lucky break then. What actually happened is when we started talking about Pocket, I started really looking into Ethereum development.
Okay.
And that was shortly after the DAO. So the price of Ethereum was under $10 at that time.
Right.
And when I started writing the smart contracts for Ethereum, I was like, oh my gosh, this is the future. So I took everything I had and actually just put it into Ethereum, and I kind of got lucky with that kind of next run up that happened. And as a result, I was able to quit my job in the May of next year.
Wow.
So I had self-funded Pocket up until about January of 2018.
Okay.
And that's when we got some initial seed funding, actually. So we'd raised about $350,000
wow, congrats, man.
in
That's
seed
great.
funding up until now. So yeah, that's kind of how we've been funded up until now, and we're just going on building. And the team has grown from just 4 of us now to about 14 people, which
Sure.
has been really cool. Some people in the part-time or full-time capacity, but yeah, it's been a ride, that's for sure.
Very cool, man. And you guys did like a retreat recently, didn't you?
We did. That was really fun. Since the team had grown from 4 people to 13 people or 14 people,
Yeah.
no one had really worked together, right? So half of the team is in Dominican Republic. We've got
you.
my co-founder Valeria, she's in Colombia,
Okay.
and the rest of us are here in Tampa.
Right.
And we just wanted we wanted everyone to kind of work together and get to know each other. And we've been in a kind of a long sprint of these last couple of months building Banana Quest.
Right.
So we did this retreat, and man, that was great. We learned a lot. We've been so focused on product that kind of everyone, we have a culture where everyone's kind of just brutally honest with each other.
Sure.
And we all kind of just learned a lot, and everyone's just came out of that really, really excited, actually.
Very cool.
And
So
Dominican
where did you
Republic
do
is
it?
in Punta Cana.
Okay.
Actually.
Nice.
So Dominican Republic's a really low cost place to do retreats, FYI.
Okay,
Um,
interesting.
yeah, yeah, we managed to rent this big 14 bedroom house
Wow.
um, for about $220 a night
Oh,
for
wow.
about 4 nights.
That's
So
insane,
so
right?
we
Like
all
insanely
we all
cheap.
yeah, yeah, so we all fit there, and man, it was really great to have 4 nights there. And at least from Florida, it's pretty cheap to fly there. So
Sure.
um, we just made that work, and it was a really great just kind of bonding time, and having everyone kind of get really excited about working together.
Sure. So
So
did you guys actually code, or it was just kind of a little bit of coding, hanging out, getting to know each other kind of, or how did it
no,
kind of go?
so we definitely had some key deliverables
Okay.
that we wanted to get done. A lot of it had to do with the protocol. Those us founders really wanted to just get kind of everyone's feedback on how we've been running the company up until now.
Interesting.
So we did kind of like a postmortem. So everyone was just brutally honest about that. And then one of the key things we wanted to do was kind of focus on the next steps for the protocol. So we were almost been ready. We'd been ready to basically start building it ourselves, right?
Sure.
And we kind of spent half of one of the days actually just building out or planning how we're going to build this thing out, right? In a real concrete manner with real deliverables and things like that. And we also have the whole marketing side of it that we planned out, kind of like how we want to, talk about Pocket in the future and things like that.
Sure.
So we really had we really got a lot out of it. That being said, we got to have a little bit of fun too. We did this fun like little buggy thing through the caves and everything, and
That's cool.
through the city and everything. So we had some fun too. But the whole really point of it was to really get some key deliverables done, because there's really nothing like working together like in a physical
Sure.
space. Right?
Yeah, fair.
So
Oh, that's
yeah,
very cool,
yeah.
man. So you are obviously heavily involved in the community as well. Do you want to talk about kind of the blockchain meetup and the open code thing that you're heavily involved in?
Yeah, so I've been a part of the Bitcoin meetup here for a couple years now,
Okay.
and I got to give a shout out to Gabe and Rosa, because they
Sure.
actually started the Bitcoin meetup back in 2013, and
Wow.
they were running this thing from there was some days it would just be two people coming to this meetup, but they did it
Sure.
without fail for every 2 weeks, every Wednesday,
Wow.
every other Wednesday, for even up until today, right? So
Sure.
um, what happened was last year in 2017, crypto really started to explode and everything,
Yeah.
and um, we started to get a lot more attention for our meetups, and so much so that before we were just doing it at a restaurant where we could pay with Bitcoin and things like that. But we
Gotcha.
quickly outgrew that restaurant, and we needed a dedicated space to host our meetups. And at that time, I was starting to do Ethereum development and things like that. So I started the Tampa Bay Blockchain Developers Meetup.
Gotcha.
And funny story, I actually started the first meetup was actually an open code. So I had about maybe 7 or 8 people come to it.
Okay.
But the problem was that, and I had been working on our Ethereum project, right? Like Pocket was this Ethereum project that we were building, and so I had a pretty
Right.
decent grasp on how to do it and everything like that. But everyone else who came really didn't have a project to work on. They were kind of just interested in Ethereum development.
Okay.
So I quickly pivoted more to just doing more kind of like demos, like live coding demos and things like that,
Okay.
to where at peak we had almost 40 people coming to our meetups and things like that, which is really cool, especially for the
That's
Tampa
huge,
Bay area.
actually.
And basically we just had everything, all the content and everything is on a GitHub that I put up, and eventually people started learning enough to actually start their own projects, right?
Okay.
So
Sure.
about a year later, I actually started doing the open codes, where on every other Wednesday when the main meetup isn't,
Okay.
people can come in and work on their projects. But I've been doing this now for about a year and a half now, and it's been great. It's been really cool. I've had other people do their demos, and we're not Ethereum only. We're pretty blockchain agnostic.
Okay.
The space we do it at is a space called Block Spaces, which is kind of like a blockchain co-work space here in Tampa. So it's really the center of blockchain in Tampa Bay. That's where we host all our meetups and everything like that. And yeah, it's been really cool, kind of seeing people get really interested. We've got a shoot off of that. Chris Williams, he does this really cool Corda and Hyperledger meetup,
Okay.
which is like the enterprise blockchain.
Very
He actually
cool.
helped build. He worked for IBM actually, and he actually
Wow.
helped build Ledger. So he has some really deep knowledge in that stuff. So we've got some really talented people here, talking and teaching some really cool stuff.
Very cool.
And a big focus is really, is really the tech, right?
Yeah.
This is really an engineering and developer driven ecosystem. And in a lot of places, you'll definitely see a lot of the interest in trading and making money and stuff. But especially for the developer meetups, we don't care nor really talk about any of that stuff, right? Really, the
Sure.
focus is teaching people the technology and trying to spreading the knowledge of the technology itself.
Sure. And I think helping them get started, right? At the end of the day.
Absolutely, absolutely, and that's what Blockspaces is an education center in the
Sure.
first place. So
Interesting.
we have the really general intro meetups, and people come there, and then they kind of find their place, right? So, for example, we host a mining Mondays, a trading Tuesdays, a general
Okay.
meetups on Wednesday. We have a newbie Friday. So it's really people come to the general meetups and then kind of split into what their interests are after that.
Very cool. Sure. Well, I think too, even just like sometimes getting your development environment, like you'll get like 90% of the way there and you'll make like one little mistake and one tiny thing doesn't work, but you can't get the whole thing running because of like one little error, right? And it just like come to you guys and be like, okay, I'm running this problem. Because you can spend hours on, Stack Overflow or in Google kind of searching around. And sometimes you find the answer right away. Sometimes it takes you hours. And I don't know about you, but me sometimes just cutting and pasting commands in the terminal can get kind of scary because you're like, what am I allowing people to do? Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and we definitely help with that because I know when I was learning, I was just banging my head against the keyboard
Yeah.
for hours. You have to take a break and come back and everything. And yeah, we try to be a space where people can come and kind of get past that quicker, right? And obviously and learn too.
Very cool. So I'm curious to get your thoughts on the whole blockchain space because I've been in software for a couple decades now, more on the design side. I'm a terrible developer. I can code, but not great. But from like the security side of the blockchain side, like, do you think it's ever going to be hackable? Or what are your thoughts on the
Um,
security side of that?
so that's interesting. That's an interesting question. I think right now we're kind of in a place where kind of like in the 1700s, 1800s, people would be robbing banks, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the kind of the strength of the dollar was still, the dollar.
Yeah,
Um, and people are experimenting with different blockchains, right? So
sure.
Bitcoin is the biggest honeypot in the world, and
Yeah,
it hasn't been hacked. Ethereum has enough hashing power to where it can't be broken, and they're doing some transitions and things like that. But there are definitely blockchains that can be hacked and will be hacked, right?
sure.
So
Okay.
what's great about the space is because of the open source nature.
Yeah,
And this is going back to my international studies and history background. We've really only tried, a handful of monetary experiments or economic experiments at any one time, right? Like, we're only
sure.
really only experimenting one at a time, right? Like, so we're in this, capitalism phase right now. But what's really cool is that each one of these blockchains is its own individual economic experiment,
Yeah,
right? And some of
interesting.
them are going to work, some of them aren't. Some of them it's because all the Bitcoin miners can change their hashing power to a smaller blockchain and kind of like overwhelm it, right?
Interesting.
Um, or you can in certain other kinds of chains you might be able to buy up enough of the token to kind of overwhelm it, right? So
Interesting.
that's a big issue that a lot of serious blockchain protocol developers are thinking about. It's like, how can this thing be broken? How can we prevent this from really being broken in a monetary way, right? So that's kind of the
Sure.
first attack vector that Bitcoin has proven, as Bitcoin has proven that can't be broken, at least with Bitcoin, right? And
Sure.
Ethereum has proven that as well, along with some of the other bigger blockchains. The next step up, though, is kind of like social engineering and kind of like political engineering
Yeah.
within the blockchain itself, where you kind of have this kind of soft power or influence with people, where everyone has their own kind of incentive, and you're kind of seeing different attacks happen at that level, right? So,
Sure.
Ethereum is forked, or I'm sorry, Bitcoin is forked, hundreds of times already.
Yep.
But you kind of see this with Bitcoin Cash and Bitcoin and things like that. So that's kind of like another attack vector where the you can't mathematically or physically buy enough computers to break the system, but maybe you can break it in a different way, right?
Sure.
So that's another issue that these blockchains are trying to contend with. And I mean, that's part of the natural way of things, it seems like, with the blockchain industry anyway.
Yeah.
We're kind of all agreeing to be in this one ecosystem, and if enough people disagree, it's really easy for them to fork and create their own, blockchain. So everyone's kind of moving into their space and kind of voting with their money, if they will, right?
Sure.
So that's really interesting, right? In terms of the actual space itself, I mean, man, we're just at the beginning. I mean,
Yeah.
it's really hard to comprehend. It's like, the internet was invented in 1962 or something like that, right?
Yeah.
1962, 63, and we really didn't get our first kind of Netscape moment until 95, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And that was only 50 million people on the internet at that time, right? Now we're at several billion, I think. So
Sure.
I mean, Bitcoin was invented 10 years ago, right?
Yeah.
So if we kind of see it in a way where right now, we work on kind of like 7 core protocols or 7 core layers, right? The internet itself,
Sure.
right?
Yep.
Um, and there's kind of dozens of competing protocols under there, but it's really just 7 layers, right? So it's like you have HTTPS and TCP/IP and these other these protocols that help companies like Amazon and Netflix and Google. All these companies are kind of built on top of the protocols, right?
Yep.
It seems like we're having a protocol for every individual thing, from money to gold to anonymous money to kind of like a general smart contract platform to prediction markets to all sorts of things. And it seems like we're on the way to being, having, potentially hundreds or thousands of kind of core protocols that we run on, right? Our general lives run on,
Sure.
as this industry gets more mature. So, I mean, and really the only ones that have gotten any real traction are just Bitcoin and Ethereum.
Sure.
So if you think about it with that time scale, man, there's going to be so many protocols that kind of work together and kind of allow for, these interesting things to be built that we haven't even thought about yet.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm always curious. I've been thinking a lot about that, and it's nice to get kind of your perspective on this. That's kind of actually building this stuff, right? Or a part of it, and have actually done development on an actual kind of popular kind of blockchain, right? And you guys are doing this stuff, and then you're seeing what other people are doing, right? So I'm always kind of curious to see where all this stuff goes, because you're right, like we're so early on in this space.
Yeah, we really are, and I mean, frankly, it's like the infrastructure isn't there
Yeah.
to really build these really cool things. Right now, Ethereum is pretty clogged up, right? So
Right.
it's tough to use Ethereum right now, and everyone's working on these big scaling solutions, but all of us who see a future where a lot of the world really runs on these blockchains, there's a lot of things that need to be built before that's even possible. So there's all this excitement and vision on the really cool things that can be built, but it just takes time. It takes a lot of really smart people working on these hard problems, stuff that's way over my head, right? Like I'll sit on a plasma scaling call or see it on YouTube for Ethereum, and it's just these guys are doing some really hard stuff, right?
Sure.
So it's a matter of time, experimentation, finding the right path, finding the right solution, and things like that. But eventually, it'll get there. The genie can't be put back in the bottle, right? So it eventually will get there, and that's opened up for lots of other blockchains who think they can do it better, which is great because that opens up for different forms of experimentation, everything like that.
Sure.
And what's great too is that because everything is open source, everything kind of grows together, and it's pretty collaborative.
Yeah.
Where someone from Zcash creates some really great new zk snark technology, and it gets implemented in Ethereum, it gets implemented in Bitcoin, or something like that. So everyone kind of lends from each other and learns from each other too in this space, which kind of pushes it all forward together either way.
Sure. No, I think that's really great. So for people that are looking to get into the space, and actually start doing some of this development and maybe even try out POKT, what advice would you give them to kind of just get started and get motivating? Because like we mentioned earlier, I think sometimes it's a bit daunting to kind of get started into these new kind of verticals, and we're so early on. But what advice do you give people to kind of actually get over that hurdle and actually start?
Yeah, so I'd say one of the trickiest things to starting blockchain development is really understanding how a blockchain works,
Okay.
right? So understanding that you're writing to this global distributed database that when you write this data, you can't control it, no one can change it, right? So I think the first part is really understanding what a blockchain is and how it works.
Okay.
And I always point people to Bitcoin first. learn about Bitcoin, learn about how Bitcoin works,
Okay.
because frankly, it's the simplest blockchain. It
Sure.
is by far the simplest one. And read the white paper. There's so much documentation and there's so much content out there that kind of explains how Bitcoin works at a technical level.
Okay.
And then making the leap to something like Ethereum is a lot easier after that, right? Where you have these generalized smart contract platforms that allow you to write applications. And everyone learns at a different pace. You could definitely, start writing Solidity to
Okay.
really understand what it's like to kind of deploy a smart contract to Ethereum, right?
Okay.
And what it means for someone to interact with it, because it's kind of a mind-blowing thing when you deploy this thing to Ethereum and it kind of sits there forever, right? And
Yeah.
it's just kind of a weird thing to get used to, and also it's you're more developing like for a space shuttle where you need to make sure that everything is perfect and secure and safe, as opposed to building like a social media app like
Yeah.
Twitter or something where
Interesting.
if there's a bug, you can fix it on the fly. One of the things about Ethereum development or any kind of smart contract development is once you deploy this contract, it's really, really hard to change your code
Okay.
afterwards, right?
Interesting.
In fact, yeah, and then there's some paradigms that are out there to help kind of upgrade your contracts if if there's a critical bug or something like that. But
Sure.
it's taken 3 years for that to mature and people to kind of really figure that out, right?
Wow.
So, it's I would say if you're not super familiar with just blockchains in general first,
Yeah.
I'd say to just learn about Bitcoin and then learn about Ethereum, because those are really the two major kind of paradigms, and it'll allow your the way you think about these things and the framework in which you approach problems to kind of get accustomed to, okay, this is how the consensus mechanism works, this is how you deploy the Solidity code. Okay, I need the ABI to kind of work with the smart contract, and et cetera, right? So that's how kind of I would say, to get started, right?
Sure.
If you want to really dive deep into it, I definitely say look at Banana Quest, and take a look at our SDKs, because we're also communicating directly with Ethereum.
Right.
And Banana Quest is a full stack app, so you can actually see from the moment that someone on the phone taps a button, you can see through the code exactly how that gets managed and manipulated and actually sent to Ethereum, and how Ethereum actually, takes that work that you did, mines it and writes it to the global state of the machine of the network, and then returns it back to you, right? So
Interesting.
so Banana Quest is it's a full stack app where you can see the full process of reading and writing to Ethereum or to a blockchain, right? So that's actually just a great kind of instructive, just looking through the code and things like that, right?
Sure.
And yeah, there's so much. There's what's great about the space is there's the content is just, it never stops, and people are constantly learning. People are constantly posting really amazing things. The research that's being done in a lot of these spaces is just at a breakneck pace. That's another thing. You should definitely keep up with the news,
Sure.
because if you don't, especially with the technical developments, 3 months off, it's going to take you a while to catch back up. So for that, Twitter is definitely the best place for that. If you were in Bitcoin back in 2013, really the core place where a lot of the conversation was happening was on the Bitcoin subreddit.
Okay.
And a lot of things, and it was interesting because there was a lot of kind of like censorship, and people weren't allowed to say certain things on Bitcoin subreddit. So a lot of the conversation actually moved to Twitter. So a lot
Interesting.
of the people who are building anything, actually, everyone is on Twitter. So it's a great resource actually for what people are thinking now, and just generally like what the mood of the industry is.
Very cool. But Michael, we're kind of out of time, so let's close with mentioning where people can get more information and try Pocket Out and Banana Quest.
Yeah, so you can go to Pocket's website. That's POKT.network.
Okay.
And you can reach all of our information through there. You can go directly to our GitHub. It's github.com/POKT-network.
Okay.
And if you want to try out Banana Quest, you can go to bananaquest.com and sign up for the beta. We're actually preparing to send out beta invites next week, our
Okay.
first round of it. So it's been pretty fun. I've been putting bananas everywhere, and
That's awesome.
actually we're going to do a Banana Quest bar crawl in about a month
Very
over
cool.
at over in St. Pete to kind of launch the app and stuff. So we're pretty excited about that.
That's very cool. And it's BANANOQUEST.com.
Correct. Banano with an O.
Yeah.
So then it's because we all speak Spanish and we're Latin.
Ah, okay. Interesting.
In some countries, the way you say banano or banana is banano, right, in Spanish. So it's kind of like a shout out to Latin group.
That's
actually.
cool. That's cool. I didn't know that, but that's cool, man. That's great. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to be on the show, and I look forward to keeping in touch with you, and have a good rest of your day, man.
Thank you, Kevin. I really enjoyed this.
Thank you. Okay. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening. Please visit our website at buildingthefutureshow.com to join the free community, sign up for our newsletter, or to sponsor the show. The music is done by Electric Mantra. You can check him out at electricmantra.com and keep building the future.